How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Bodacious Rant. As we end the month of love, so do we have to end another series very early in the year. And this is one I was very, not necessarily on the fence. I just had hopes. I was like, please be good, just because, with this franchise and HBO, it's been kind of hit or miss, specifically the Game of Thrones franchise. And if you haven't guessed already, we're talking about the latest series to join in that universe, which is A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms, based on the tales of Dunk and Egg by George R.R. Martin, which talks about the adventures of Sir Duncan the Tall, a hedge knight within the Seven Kingdoms, or Westeros, really, as I should say. Because Game of Thrones, depending on who you ask, there are some people like the Star Wars sequels that say every season was great, but if you really watch Game of Thrones all the way through, the last season was a hot dumpster fire. And then my only gripe with House of the Dragon is that not enough warfare with dragons, and also the gaps in between seasons are just like... It's just one of those shows that comes to mind. But anyways, we are going to get into spoilers a little bit, so Bern and I shall give our rantings first, and then come on back for those of you who haven't seen it all. But yeah, given that this is a very new series, it's actually a much shorter series than the last two, where it's only 6 episodes, about 30 to 40 minutes each. I honestly think that format has worked out the best for this. It's one of the reasons why I like this the most. And just the cast is amazing, which I'll get into in the spoilers. And I like that it's still very Game of Thrones, but at the same time, I think for new audiences, it almost feels very much like A Knight's Tale or like Kingdom of Heaven in a way. So I really dug all that. My initial ranting with this is a hard 5 out of 5. I think this is a great series to kick off the year. And if you're new to Game of Thrones, I think this is one you can kind of get into without having to watch House of the Dragon or the original series. Like it would help a lot, but I think this is a good one for a bit of everyone to get into. So yeah, 5 out of 5 for me. I definitely recommend this one.
Yeah, man, what a fun surprise of a show. Like you, I mean, I hadn't read any of the Game of Thrones books, and certainly hadn't read any of the Duncan Egg novellas that he's done so far. I think he's done 3. But yeah, so I had no familiarity with these characters, and again, no familiarity with this world outside of the 2 series that I've seen and really enjoyed. I loved a lot of Game of Thrones. Like you said, the end disappointed just about everyone, me included. So that was a little bit of a tough pill to swallow. And the mixed feelings with House of the Dragons is one that I share too, where the first season was incredible, and there were a lot of really good parts of the second season, but it just felt weighted down by filler, which and to top it off, like you mentioned, the weight between the seasons is just, it doesn't really help the issue a lot there. So seeing that we were going to get something a little bit different in tone and the way that the show is structured, like a smaller 6 episode, roughly 30-40 minute in runtime, it seemed like this was a good opportunity to sort of, like you mentioned, bring in maybe some new fans and give the fans who are already like looking for something in this world a little bit of a different flavor than we've gotten with the other 2 series, which are more similar in tone and the way that it's done. And I thought that they knocked it out of the park here. This show, it's great that you mentioned A Knight's Tale, because it certainly has those elements where it's a little bit like asynchronistic, it's a little bit different. There's some needle drops here and there that you don't get in Game of Thrones, and there's a certain cutaway moments where you inject it with like a humor that you wouldn't normally get in the other 2 series. And to top it off, it's just smaller in scale, and it's really focused on just the lowborn characters is how you would say, because the other series we're following the royalties, the royal families basically. So this is like a much smaller view of this big world, and it's such a fun corner to play around in, and I feel like they really did a good job of letting us see another side to this type of world. Dunk is such a really great main character to follow. Someone who feels like they don't belong in this universe. We've seen that there's a lot of bad things happening all the time, and people are very cynical, and it's such a harsh environment to live in. But you have someone who's sort of wide-eyed and still holding on to the virtues of what a knight should be, and I love how that gets tested throughout the season. and in the fun ways that it kind of brings in elements from these other series. So yeah, man, it was just so well done, so well shot. It does not look like it's the smallest budget of the shows, and it really worth all the money. You can see the money went into the craft of this series. It's just one of those, I think, that it feels like lightning in a bottle, and it feels like it really rejuvenated my own and a lot of people's interest in this Game of Thrones universe. So for me, I think this was an excellent first season, and I'm very much looking forward to seeing what else they do with these characters. It's just such a fun look at Westeros, and it's just really such a breath of fresh air. So yeah, for me, it's going to be a 5 out of 5 as well. We're early on in the year, but I wouldn't be surprised if this stays in my favorite series of 2026.
Yeah, you know what? Before I get into my thoughts on why this show will stay in the top five for both me and you, I do agree with you on that. We'll get into the spoilers on that. So yeah, 5 out of 5 for me and Byrne. Whether you're a diehard Game of Thrones fan by the novels or the show, or if you're just kind of maybe thinking about let's see something new out there, especially in the sword and sandals genre, feel free to check this one out. It's on HBO. All episodes are there. Again, 6 episodes, super easy binge, not a whole lot, but. We're going to get into the spoilers a little bit, so Bern and I, as always, will talk about some of the things we like, some of the character moments that really got to us, and just the general themes and whatnot that we enjoyed. So, yeah, for those of you who haven't seen all of it or haven't caught up, come on back when you do, so that way you can join in on the convo and see what Bern and I liked. But yeah, let's hop into it. So, yeah, like you, I've never read the books, even though I really want to, specifically the Targaryen stuff, just because they're up until this show, they were my favorite family, just mostly because of the dragons and the lore behind it. Aegon the Conqueror creating, essentially uniting the Seven Kingdoms into one country, essentially. But I feel like this show, because this is the first one, it dawned on me that this takes place from the opposite point of view, because both Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon were all seen from like the big families, like Baratheons, the Starks, the Targaryens, the Lannisters, basically the ruling class of Westeros. And this is the first one we got where it's like straight up just from like you said, a lowborn, or a peasant, if you will, someone who's trying to be a knight, and an honorable one at that. And it just kind of really shows that dichotomy between like how the ruling class live and then how everybody else lives, especially going to like a tournament event, which also, that's why it gave me very Knight's Tale vibes, just because that was basically about a guy being a knight, going to these tournaments and kind of earning his reputation. So I really like that. I also like the fact that Dunk is really just an inexperienced dude. He is not a badass yet. He is not the tall legend, or that basically Brienne of Tarth becomes famous for in the first series. Like, oh, you're related to Sir Duncan the Tall. Like, that's a big deal. Like, so you do come from a long lineage of knights. So I like that he kind of came off almost like the best way I thought of it is like a high school freshman in a way. Like, oh, I'm new to this. I'm trying to earn my way. It's like, bro, you're not even at our level yet. You need to learn and get there. So I think the actor who played Dunk the Tall, Sir Duncan, was, let me see what his name was.
Peter Claffey.
Peter Claffey. I thought, because I didn't know what Sir Duncan the Tall would look like, so when I saw the trailer, I was like, that's the guy with the goofy looking hairdo and stuff. Like, not goofy, but it just looks very, like, again, sophomoric and stuff, like very peasant like. I was like, man, that's not who I imagined, but he's Sir Duncan the Tall to me now. So I really liked his portrayal, and I just like the general point of view that this series had, because it definitely was like, yeah, I'm good with without the Targaryen incest, and then just having that reputation of just being very ruthless people. We finally get to see that from this point of view. So I thought it was a very refreshing take on the whole Game of Thrones franchise in general.
Yeah, I think Sir Duncan the Tall is such an interesting character, and it's such a great character to like sort of see this world through, right? Because even though like Game of Thrones itself as a series, it's like a sort of a deconstruction on these like medieval fantasy stories that we hear of as kids or read in books, and that series took all that and gave it like this more darker, more realistic edge to it, and to kind of go then through that with his character, it kind of brings that sort of like that sort of wide-eyed whimsy to it, back to it, where it's like, maybe we can change this world, and maybe if we're good, and maybe if we're just like, if we're good people, and if we lead with our honor, we can make a difference, right? And it's fun to see like how his character both succeeds and fails at doing that, and within this first season of the show. I love how his sort of virtues get tested, and by the end of it, come to find out that he just has these values, right? Just because of who he is. He was never knighted by Sir Orlin, so it's like he just, this is just who he is as a person. He's not doing it for any some sort of oath that he swore or duty that he has to some house or something. He just wants to be a good guy, and he thinks that if like he does that, he can like go through this world and possibly like try to make a difference. Maybe like make a life for himself. So he's really doing it for the love of the game, if we're looking at it. And just to see how him and Egg played fantastically by Dexter Saul Ansel. Their dynamic together and the way that their relationship changes throughout the series. I love how it reinforces those elements of like, just wanting to do good, and Egg is such a different type of Targaryen who doesn't seem to want the things that Targaryens usually want, right? He just wants the adventure. He wants to be amongst the people. So we have these two characters that feel like outsiders in this world, and we're sort of seeing Westeros through their eyes, and it led to a very fun season. So they're dynamic together. These two actors, just absolutely perfect from top to bottom.
Oh, 100%. I love their dynamic, almost like the little brother helping out the big brother in a lot of scenes and stuff, especially Egg's little story about like, oh, I would come back from war, marry the second daughter of the hand or something. It's like, and he's like, the second? He's like, well, you would marry the first. And it's like, God damn, he's like that little brother's like, I want what's best for you, and I want to be there with you, experience life. So very tender moments with them, but also I really like that so far, even though Duncan isn't necessarily a knight yet, it's one of those things, he's shown way more honor, integrity, and values than majority of the knight characters we've seen in either series. Like, we got like Jaime Lannister was a knight, and I forgot that one older experienced knight who fought with the Targaryens, but also helped Daenerys. I forgot what his name was.
Jorah? Are you talking about Jorah?
Not Jorah. He was the other one, the other senior knight that like he was there for he was there for the Lannisters and the Baratheons, but then he left to go fight with Daenerys. I forgot his name, but he was also is Arthur Dayne, I think?
Maybe I think so. I think that's yeah.
Like they were noble men, but by the time we got to them in Game of Thrones, you get that sense like there really is no honor amongst them at a certain point. They are just there just to say, I'm a knight and I'm still doing this kind of thing. So yeah, I definitely agree that this is a very green-eyed approach for Duncan, where he has these just genuine feelings of what a knight should be, and honor and stuff, and especially that part with the right before the trial of the seven, where he's asking any of the lords, like, are you guys not willing to fight for what's right? Like, at least I'm not, like, he wasn't trying to say like, oh, it's my point of view, I'm right. It's like, this is just the situation, who's willing to lay it down? And everybody just kind of sat there quietly. It was like, cool, I guess you guys really are like quote unquote knights, man. You really stand for the honorable or the weak and stuff. So I like that this show really had those values, and this is the first character that it gives us that spark of hope in Westeros, kind of like Andor did in Star Wars, where it's like, man, there's that one piece of hope we need in this dark and brooding world and stuff that keeps kicking characters down, for someone just to remind us like there's always the right way, and sometimes it's harder, but it's worth it at the end. So I really like that what they portrayed in that season.
Mm-hmm. And I love that that's like the lesson he learns, right? Because we as the audience know that all of these highborn families, right, are not the greatest of people, right? They're always sort of like backstabbing each other, and he still has like this idea of these lords, and that just by virtue of being a lord, you have this sort of honor about you, right? But yeah, when that moment when he calls them out, right before the trial, it's like, oh, so this is the lesson that Sir Duncan has to learn in this world, that you don't just get honor from these people. You either have to earn it or you have to take it, and that's kind of the way that this harsh world works. And unfortunately for him, his own valor can only take him so far, and we see it inspire a lot of other people too. So he does have his victories there, but this idea of like wanting to serve a house and being a knight for some high family, it just gets shattered immediately, and we get to see like, oh, okay, like him have more of an appreciation for Sir Arlen by the end of it, where he was a hedge knight because he too also kind of just had a love of the game, a love of just like being virtuous. Even though he drunkenly killed that guy defending him, he still served his oath, like in his own way. So just him sort of circling back to that, just it felt really right for a character trajectory in this first season. I thought it was great.
Yeah, and the other thing that's kind of been eating at me is like, because Game of Thrones, I would say, is definitely like political, is fantasy with politics and stuff like that. Like the very first series of Game of Thrones, definitely more political leaning, where it's like you said, all these royal families and stuff are all after the Iron Throne, and then House of the Dragon continues that that same trend, but within the Targaryen family, not necessarily like other kingdoms trying to get after it. But this one still has that political, that kind of political aspect to it, just because, again, like I said, this is told from a lowborn's point of view. So we get to see, like, how he has his moral ethics, kind of like, in society today, the working class, we have our traditions, we have our, our cultures and our own moral guidelines and stuff. But then when you get to a certain class of people, like the ultra wealthy and those with power, those lines get very gray, if not, very muddled. And even characters, as much as I loved them, like Lionel Baratheon and Baelor Targaryen, even though they stood up with Duncan, they're still very imperfect people, because of their power and their status. So I like that this one, I'm sure there's going to be people like, it's not political at all. Like, it's not like those. I'm like, you're not paying attention then what's going on, because this is still very much that, especially with what's going on today in the world. Like, the poor people, like, people want to become like military, like the knights in this instance. We got to stand up for what's right and, take it to the man, essentially, the ruling class. So I like that this one felt very much like that, especially with just the cast did a great job, whether they're playing the other people like the blacksmith or the other like squires and stuff versus the ruling class in this one.
Yeah, I mean, I think this show, more so than the other two, really shows you the consequences of these higher families' actions. Even though the stakes are a lot smaller here, it's just at this small tournament, right? These lords of these families, like the Baratheons or the Targaryens, they get to come and just have a fun little holiday, right? But the way that they sort of affect the people around them, they're sort of oblivious to, like, oh, like me, this person doing this thing leads to this like greater like consequence, right? They just by virtue of them being there. So it's like it's the people who end up suffering for that, and it's like they didn't really ask for any of these things, but these guys gotta just come down from their castles, create a little bit of chaos, and they just go back to where they want whenever they're done with it. So it's the people, it's the like the common people that have to deal with all the actions of these characters that they get to just come in, have fun, and leave without any sort of real consequences. I mean, some did, in the case of Baelor, but everyone else seemed to like just kind of walk away from this, where it's like Duncan's life was literally like on the line, by virtue of just like I'm forgetting his name, the Aryans, Aryans, just by him just being an asshole. So it's like it's him who has to deal with that, not this kid who gets to just come over here, throw his little whiny weight around, and just gets to walk away from all of that. So yeah, it was, I think it portrayed all the things that you mentioned very, very perfectly. That if you're of a certain class, you kind of get to do whatever you want, and that's unfortunate.
Yeah, I thought there was something too where it's like Lord Ashford, who was hosting the tournament. It's like he raised taxes on like the land around him and stuff, so he could pay for this. Very much like that scene in Knight's Tale to get Heath Ledger going. It's like, oh, he raised taxes 6 times to pay for tourney this year. It's like, yeah, he gets a banquet while his people starve and shit. So it's like that's kind of the aspect. That's the effects that this had too. And I actually really liked Duncan's flashback on how he got to be with Sir Arlen. I believe that was his knight's name. I could be getting wrong on that one, but it's like he was just a lowborn kid trying to survive with his friend, and yeah, it gets affected by the ruling class and stuff like that, and so he's almost kind of like forced into that life, but he not forced into it, but he had the choice: do I continue that life and die like my friend, or do I try and be something better? So again, just spoke to his character. The other thing I liked about this show too is just the one thing Game of Thrones has never failed in all honesty, is the set design. Even though this place only took place on these tournament grounds and stuff on this little field, it was still so rich to see, like the lands, the way it was, the tone of everything, and even the armor designs. Because while I feel like Game of Thrones could improve upon some stuff, I like that this felt a little more grounded with some of the armor pieces, specifically Duncan's stuff. It felt very like contemporary to, or like more like our realities kind of stuff. So I just thought it was very well just done as always. Like the oh my god, I can't talk. The standard with the costumes and the set design is, it's still held very high with this one, even though it's a very short and compact series.
Yeah, dude, I'm so glad you mentioned the armor. I think this is some of the best armor I've ever seen in sort of like a medieval, fantasy setting. I thought it was just all looked so great. It was all so tailored to, the specific characters and their family. Lionel with his big stag horns looks so cool. The Kingsguard have never looked better. Their armor looked amazing. Just so much attention to detail. Again, like you mentioned, how Dunk's armor looks tells you all you need to know about his character. Across the board, it was just so great. The armor, I just love looking at everybody's armor in the show. I just want like stills of every character just so I can like stare at it and just like suck in all the details. It was really really well done. Hats off to all the people who were working on all of that, because they did a fantastic job. And yeah, the set designs were, like you said, we're in this one area for 6 episodes, and it never got old. And it felt like by the time the show ended, it kind of felt like a very familiar place, and that's something you want out of really good set design, where it feels like a character unto its own. So yeah, all of those technical aspects, absolutely fantastic. They completely nailed it. And that's why I was saying in the beginning that this doesn't feel like a lower budget show than the other two. In some aspects, it feels even better, just because you can kind of stay and look at all these things and kind of appreciate them longer than going from place to place to place that the other series do. So yeah, I loved all of that.
Yeah, I just remember when I messaged you, like, doesn't feel like a lot has happened. You're like, what are you talking about? I'm like, I was thinking more of like, because they stay in this one location, where like in Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon, we see Casterly Rock, we see the Stormlands, we see the Vale and Dorne and all that stuff. Again, it's a nice fresh take on this that's why I think new people could get into this no problem, because it's a very focused story on this story of Duncan the Tall. And I'm definitely looking forward to more seasons, since there are more stories with him and Egg. Like, I want to see their adventures. The other thing I do want to comment on, when you brought it up earlier, was the music choice. I thought it was very interesting that they did not stick with just like the typical Game of Thrones score. There was definitely more pop culture music in there. Not like modern, not Kendrick Lamar or anything like that. But I thought it was nice too, because even then the songs still felt like they worked with the show. It didn't take me out of it like, oh man, this more normal song, like I'm not in the fantasy world anymore. It's like, no, it actually just adds to the story, because I feel like it's a very underdog story that can match either Game of Thrones or something modern day, something in the future, what have you. It's a very translatable story across multiple like franchises and stuff. So I thought it worked really well.
Yeah, me too. I mean, you get like little hints of like spaghetti western, style music, a little bit of jazz here and there, and then there is, the needle drop in the last episode. Again, it does a great job of like setting its own tone and own personality. Like it tells you from the go, like this is not going to be like those other two series. This is going to be its own thing, and you're either along for the ride or you're not. But we're not really going to change this tone outside of what it is, what they established. From the very like second scene of this series, you kind of know that this is not like a lot of the other shows, where even though there are a lot of weird and gross things in there, seeing your main character kind of defecate next to a tree just kind of, it kind of sets a very different tone than the other series. So I think once that happened, it's like, okay, like this is very different. The way that the title drop happens is very different. All those little elements add such a fun personality to this series. Where yeah, it's a different flavor, but again, those other elements that make Game of Thrones are gonna find their way into here. Like by the end of it gets very serious in tone. But it's not that the entire way through, and that's what kind of makes it more impactful when those moments happen.
Yeah, 100%. Like I said, I think the last song that really fired up my mind when you brought it up was the last song at the end of the last episode. Like it was just like, oh man, this is just the beginning of their adventure. So I just want to. It just got me excited for the next season. I did see something too where it's like, I think they're like the main actor, like Peter Caffley, was like, oh yeah, we can go for like 14 seasons. I'm like, 14? You want to do 14 of this? But at the same time, it's such a digestible show, and depending how many stories, how many adventures there are with Duncan and Egg, it's like they probably could, and I'd be for it because this is very easy to watch, and but it still felt like we got a good amount of character work. Like so, it sacrificed length, but not the story. So I really appreciated that. Other than that, am I looking forward to House of the Dragon season 3 this year? Yes and no, just because we gotta I think they got one more season after this, so it better just reach up to this standard, in my opinion, of storytelling. We better get some real satisfaction out of this next one, in my opinion. But yeah, I got nothing else to praise or really critique about it. Burn, anything that you felt like this one could have improved on at all, or maybe something you would have wanted to see more?
No, nothing on those ends, but I did want to shout out more of Daniel Ings as Sir Lionel Baratheon and Bertie Carvel as Baelor. They were both tremendously cast. Daniel Ings as Lionel just brings such a fun element to the rich kid party boy thing. It's like he's just there to have fun. He's there to have a good time, and that sort of energy was very infectious. And a lot of the comedic beats of the series come from his character. So that was a lot of fun to see from someone who's highborn. Like we don't really get to see that side of those characters in the other series that are a little bit play a little bit more fast and loose and are just there to kind of have fun. So I thought he was great, and then on the other end of the spectrum, Baelor just really great character. Again, gives us one of those. He's one of the good Targaryens, So it was fun to see that side of like someone who's a little bit more compassionate, because a lot of the characters that we do see are very dismissive of the lowborn characters. Again, we don't really get to see a lot of them in the other series, but you get that sort of element. They're kind of like too good for everyone else. That where we see them interact with these people, they're not really paid attention to. They're very much background, but just the way that he treated Dunk's character was really good, and the performance was great from both of these guys. So I really thought they did a good job with the casting for those two guys in particular. I thought they give us two different sides of the same coin, and that is these lords, right? So I thought for them to bounce off of Duncan and Egg. Really, really good stuff. Again, stuff that I didn't know I wanted to see from a Game of Thrones series.
Yeah, I like that this one we got to see the Baratheons more so again, just because House of the Dragon, they're not really there except for the end of the first season where where they try and go to Storm's End to win their favor. So it was kind of nice to see this is Robert Baratheon's grandfather, great grandfather, because this show is in between House of the Dragon, where House of the Dragon's like 100 something years before Game of Thrones, and this one's 70 or 80. I could be off with the time, but they're not so far in the past where it's impossible to comprehend. This show is definitely another. It's kind of also kind of setting up what's going to happen in the first season. We're definitely seeing the reminiscence of the good natured Targaryens, very much what Viserys tried to be, Rhaenyra's kids, what they're trying to be right now in House of the Dragon. And what Daenerys strived to be in the series. And we also got to see that the Baratheons still party hard. They know how to hold their liquor. So, yeah, I really like this one. I'm very happy that it did not disappoint, because it would have been another pill to swallow. Game of Thrones, did the last season of the first series, did that really set the did it curse this whole franchise? But so far it's not, so I'm very happy with that.
Yeah, and I'm also very happy that it seems like we're not going to have to wait long for the next season. It seems they're already shooting. I think the plan is for it to premiere, sometime next year. So more of that, please. From these series. I'm glad we're kind of seeing a shift back to a yearly release when it comes to these shows. So hopefully that's the case. Because I just want more from these characters right away.
Yeah, I mean, I think these the production companies and these streaming services, it's like you gotta you can only make something so great, but then make the consumers wait so long to the point where we lose interest. I can only rewatch a series or something so many times before I'm like, okay, when's the next one coming out? What are we doing with this? So yeah, that is nice to hear. I'm glad that they're already going on season 2 because I want more. This was good stuff. So that's about it for me and Byrne. All our praise and stuff, not really too many critiques. Just because it was a damn near perfect series, like for a sophomore series in HBO and the Game of Thrones universe. So definitely looking forward to more as we go into March, everyone. Just keep tuning in and stay bodacious and just keep on ranting for us.
Absolutely, everybody. Be good, be safe, and as always, we'll catch y'all on the next one.